Okay, welcome everybody. This is our first membership meeting of the year. We had to cancel our first quarter meeting at the Med, and we had scheduled Guy Preston to come and talk with us. So he's come to talk to us here at the second quarter meeting. Typically we do an ice cream social in the new skate park, but we're doing it this way instead. We're not sure about our third quarter membership meeting, the dinner at wherever, because Seacliff Inn has changed ownership. So, stay tuned. And then the other big news for us is that the Beachgate trails and the Moosehead trails are being nicely maintained by Seacliff Improvement Association volunteers. So their names are in the newsletter, this past newsletter that you got. So I hope everyone please reads that. We also have a Walk Safely Through Seacliff sign contest that you all got an email for. That wasn't in the newsletter, was it, Rebecca? Yes, or yes, it was. Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Guy. I'm turning over to Zach and he will introduce Guy. And we did give your questions that people submitted to Guy in advance, so he will probably be answering some of them. And we'll see how much time we have at the end. So thanks, Zach.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you all for joining in on this way. And I can see a couple of you and you all look amazing. Tina cut my hair recently, so please compliment my home haircut the next time you see either her or me. I thought she did pretty good. You'll appreciate the fact that she wouldn't do our 5-year-old first. She said she wanted to do me first. She didn't trust the skills on our 5-year-old. So that's how the priorities work in our Seacliff household. But what I also wanted to do was thank you. The last couple of weeks have been exceptionally difficult with the county families. I'm sure you all know, especially with the loss of Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller. And so many in Seacliff have stepped up to support the family and support the sheriff's office. And I just wanted to personally thank you. We live in such a beautiful community. And if you still want to donate in some way, either your business does or you want to give directly to the family, you can just get in touch with me after this and I'll let you know how to do it. They're in for a long haul, as you can imagine, so it's a pretty difficult situation. And I imagine you may have also have read or heard that one of our own in the Board of Supervisors family, Allison Endert, who worked for Ryan Coonerty and previously for Neil Coonerty, was struck and killed by a car by, actually it appears, an intoxicated driver. And she died, and her daughter was with her and hit, but it will survive. But that's been a very difficult time in the Board of Supervisors office, and she was very actively involved with Ryan in regards to even transportation issues and did so much for our community. So please keep a lot of people in your thoughts right now. It's a difficult time across the country and across our county, and I think that some love and kindness would go a long way. I actually am really excited to introduce Guy tonight because Guy's been working for the Regional Transportation Commission as the executive director for the last about year and a half or so. And he's really helped transform the agency in a short time. I've been very impressed by his skill set, his directness, his honesty, and his remarkable amount of transportation knowledge. He has about 30 years of experience in the transportation world, both in the public and private sector. In fact, he worked for the Sonoma County Transportation Authority in a couple of different capacities, but he provided oversight in the development and delivery of over $1.5 billion in transportation programs and day-to-day oversight for the first 10 years of their sales tax measure, which is very similar to the Measure D measure, and was very successful. And I've seen some of that work already in helping leverage that money to receive state and federal funds for other transportation projects there, including highway expansion. So Guy has a significant amount of experience that we're really hoping that he can help us break through this really 30-year logjam of transportation issues within the county. And I'll tell you, as soon as I asked him that SIA, Emily and Rebecca wanted to know if he'd be willing to speak, and within minutes he wrote right back and said yes. He has said to me many a times that he knows that the Mid-County and South County areas have been underserved historically under the transportation side, and he takes that very seriously. He's traveled down here to walk these streets with me, to ride his bike in this area. We went on a drive together. We had lunch over here together just to look at some of how these things impact. So he's taken it very seriously, and Guy, I really do appreciate the fact that you're willing to do this and care so much about the Mid and South County regions, because I know that a lot of people that are on this Zoom meeting have felt that for a long time that they haven't had their voice heard. And I have a lot of faith that with you as executive director, they will start having that voice heard. So I'm going to hand it over to Guy Preston.
Thank you, Zach. That was a very nice introduction. I would have very much enjoyed doing the social with you all, but this gives me an opportunity to provide a PowerPoint presentation and show you some slides and really address some of the things that you may be interested in. And can you see the PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay, so some of the questions that I was asked to answer is, who RTC is and what are some of the projects that we have going forward. So the RTC is an autonomous regional transportation planning agency created by the state of California in 1972, and we're responsible for planning, policy, and funding transportation projects. So who are the decision makers? So all 5 Board of Supervisors have a seat at the table, as well as a direct appointee from each of the cities. And then Santa Cruz Metro, our transit provider, gets to appoint 3 members. So there are 12 commissioners on the RTC, as well as Caltrans provides an ex officio member who also sits on our board but does not get to vote. So who are the players? We look at ourselves very much as a team. We don't work alone. We work with the local cities and the counties, the elderly and disabled providers, the federal agencies. We work with the schools, UCSC, Cabrillo College, Santa Cruz Metro, of course, and Caltrans, because we all play a part in providing certain aspects to regional transportation. And then we also work very closely with our stakeholder groups. We strive to represent the community's interests within Santa Cruz. We work with an elaborate network of user and interest groups, including businesses such as chambers of commerces, business councils, schools, representatives from health, safety, children and senior, disabled, and low-income communities, local agency partners such as the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County has been a big player, the California Coastal Conservancy and the Resource Conservation District are also agencies that we work with. So one of the big things that we are working on is trying to solve the regional transportation problem here in Santa Cruz County. To address congestion concerns between Watsonville and Santa Cruz, RTC completed a unified corridor investment study in 2019. And the objective of the UCS was to identify multimodal transportation investments that provide the greatest potential benefit and most effective use of 3 parallel routes between Watsonville and Santa Cruz that define our corridor. Our primary north-south corridor is centered on Highway 1. The most congested portion is shown here in blue. On the inland side of Highway 1 lies Soquel Drive and Freedom Boulevard, shown in green. And today, the cars that are frustrated with the traffic on Highway 1, they exit and they clog the local street network, and they make it very unsafe for pedestrians and bicyclists. The Unified Corridor Study identified complete street improvements on the local street network, including buffered bike lanes, sidewalk gap closures, crosswalk improvements, and adaptive signal control with transit priority for buses, and that's for Soquel Drive and Freedom Boulevard. The UCS also identified bicycle and pedestrian improvements on Soquel Drive to link up with new active transportation overcrossings on Highway 1 to get to the coastal side of the highway, and that would be closer to Santa Cruz, the Chanticleer overcrossing. The Capitola Bridge is going to need to be replaced, and that will have sidewalks and bike lanes. And then leading to Seacliff, the Mar Vista overcrossing project was identified as a very important link between the inland and the coastal side of the highway. the Santa Cruz branch rail line is shown in orange, and it's primarily on the coastal side of the highway. And RTC purchased this, this asset in 2012. And for this underutilized route of our corridor, the commission is developing and building a world-class bicycle and pedestrian trail along the rail line while seeking opportunities to develop passenger transit service. And I'll talk more about that later. And then, as you're probably aware, the Seacliff neighborhood sits right in the middle of this map, just west of where all these routes converge. And where they all converge is really the biggest choke point on our main north-south corridor. It is such a significant choke point that it's actually been given a name, and it's often referred to as the Atlas Strangler. And it's really where all of our problems are centered. Transportation between Watsonville and Santa Cruz will not be solved until this location is addressed. So one of the things that I was very fortunate when I came to RTC to have already in place was Measure D. And you know, I'm sitting behind the Measure D logo. The Measure D ordinance was a significant reason why I was excited to come work for RTC, because it provided the funding necessary to really work on the transportation projects in Santa Cruz County. And it was approved by 2/3 of the voters, which is required. It's a 1/2-cent sales tax for 30 years, and it's estimated to generate $760 million over that time period. I want to thank the Seacliff community for supporting the measure. I'm sure there was a lot of yes votes. There were probably some no's too, but it really was brought based on its expenditure plan and its distribution of funding, which I show here in this pie chart. Everything on the right side is what we call direct allocation projects. It's our neighborhood and street projects, which is 30% of our measure. And I'll talk more about that later, as well as 20% going to transit and paratransit providers. On the left-hand side, our sales tax measure has our regional programs, and 17% of the measure goes to active transportation, 8% goes to the rail corridor, and 25% goes to the highway corridor. And one of the questions I received in advance was, how will budget restrictions due to COVID-19 affect county projects moving forward? Will the allocated dollars be? And COVID-19 has affected the economy, and yes, Measure D revenue is expected to go down. It's probably going to affect the right side of that pie chart sooner than the left side, because those are direct allocation expenditures that go to locals for projects that are probably more ready to go. Whereas on the left side, those regional projects, which I'll talk about later in my presentation, were more on the project development side, where the big expenditures were expected to come later, and we're doing more of the pre-construction phases, and we think we can weather the storm a little bit better on that side. So the first category, or neighborhood projects, that 30% gets allocated by formula to the county and the cities, and it's meant to improve street conditions, repair and maintenance, but also to kind of create more of a complete street sort of atmosphere within the communities that the money is being spent. And you'll see here a photograph of what a complete street is meant to be. And that's a street that can address multiple modes of transportation, not just the vehicle. So, you know, in this particular example, you see green lanes for bicycles, you see crosswalks, you see a bus stopping at a transit stop, as well as vehicles using the location. And this is meant more like for the improvements on Soquel Drive. The next category, transit and paratransit, receives direct allocations of 20%, and 16% goes directly to Metro, who runs our bus service, as well as Paracruz, and 4% goes to Community Bridges for their paratransit operations. So the active transportation category receives 17% of the money, and that funding is meant to go to the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail Network, where we're developing a 32-mile coastal rail trail spine which consists of 20 segments and 18 miles of spur tracks. And after purchasing the rail line in 2012, we developed this master plan, and it really is the guiding document of where we're going to go. But it's still a planning level document. It's not a fully engineered, environmentally cleared project at this time. And I'm going to speak more to where we're going with this. So we've moved pretty aggressively since I've come on board to try to develop as much of this trail as we possibly can. You know, starting on the left side of this map, you'll see Davenport, and that's at the far left end of the pink line. And the pink line represents projects that have all of the pre-construction phases funded, but we're still looking for construction funding. You know, on the right side, you'll see the red line extend to Wilder Ranch, and that little line probably should have pointed to the end of the red line. So all of that is under development up to a point where the gray line begins, and that's an existing path from Santa Cruz to Wilder Ranch. And then from that point on, across the west side of Santa Cruz, from Natural Bridges to the Bay California Street intersection, the city of Santa Cruz is constructing right now a section of the trail along the rail line. Then the line turns pink again, where we're looking for construction funding to get down to the wharf. In front of the wharf, there is a completed section that goes along the boardwalk and across the San Lorenzo River Bridge to the Seabright community, and that's where I live. And from that point, across the bridge, all the way through past Seacliff, across Aptos Village, and down to Rio Del Mar, all of that is funded for pre-construction. And I'm working with the city of Santa Cruz on the western or southern portion, and I'm working with the county on the northern portion to develop preliminary engineering and environmental documents so we can apply for grants and start to construct this section of the trail. And so one of the questions I got is, will the trail be continuous and fit within the corridor the entire way through Seacliff, Aptos Village, and Rio Del Mar? And when will these sections be designed? And what is the timeline for construction? So segment 11 of the trail, and if you're more interested in all the segments, it's you can look at the master plan. It's located on our website, and I'll show you our website address at the end of today's presentation. Segment 11 of the trail runs through the Seacliff neighborhood, and on the northern portion of the neighborhood, segment 11 of the trail will be located between the rail line and Poplar Street. And there would likely need to be an arrangement with the county to use some of the vegetated area, which is part of the county's right-of-way. And as the trail passes Mar Vista towards State Park Drive, the rail right-of-way widens to 50 feet. And that is sufficient for both transit and trail. So yes, it'll fit. But that said, the devil is in the details. The county is in the process of hiring an engineering and environmental consultant to perform preliminary engineering and to prepare the environmental document. And there will be public meetings and details about how this section of trail should be developed. And the public input will be part of that process. Segment 11 ends at State Park Drive, and that's where segment 12 starts. Segment 12, starting at State Park Drive, RTC is taking the lead, and we're developing the trail over the freeway to Aptos Village, and then back over the freeway down to the Rio Del Mar crossing of the rail line. And this segment was in, it was included in the scope of work for the Highway 1 State Park Drive to Freedom Boulevard Bus and Shoulder Ox Lane project. We're just started environmental. It'll take about 2 years to complete environmental. It's usually about another year to 2 years to complete final design, and then you can go to construction but it's all dependent upon getting that construction funding. That entire pink line is pre-construction. Construction is funded, but construction, we're still looking for the funding for that. So hopefully that answers the question there. So the rail corridor receives 8% of Measure D money, and it was to preserve existing infrastructure, including the maintenance and repair of the rail line. And funding can also be used to analyze transportation options. So we started the effort in terms of analyzing transportation options with the Unified Corridor Study. And we have another study going on now, which I'll discuss next. But I had a couple questions regarding whether or not we will see freight north of Watsonville, and if so, when. And my answer to that is I don't expect there to be freight north of Watsonville anytime soon. At the moment, the line is out of service due to a washout and bridge repairs needed. And once that work is complete, there could be, but it would depend on there being a customer. Right now, I don't know of any freight customers north of Watsonville. There hasn't been a lot of interest. We do have a freight operator. And if somebody was to ask for service north of Watsonville, that operator would need to provide service to that customer. But right now, there are no customers north of Watsonville. And then the other question was, will we see recreational rail on the rail line? And if so, when? And currently there is recreational rail on the line between the boardwalk at Felton, and that's run by Roaring Camp. But we have an agreement with our freight operator that requires that he submit a recreational rail plan. And we did that because part of our funding that we use to acquire the rail line requires that we use it for passenger rail, and recreational rail qualifies. So any recreational rail plan will be subject to the approval of the commission. That plan is right now supposed to be submitted by March of 2021, but the RTC may need to extend that deadline. We've already extended it once because of the repairs that are needed on the rail line. But there has been past interest by potential providers, including restoring the Suntan Express service from San Jose to the boardwalk. There's been interest by Roaring Camp to expand service between Capitola and the boardwalk. And then there's been some interest in the past to provide some sort of recreational service up to Davenport. So that's what I know for now, but that certainly could change over time. So what we're doing right now is a transit corridor alternatives analysis. And, right now you see, an old style locomotive with traditional rail cars attached. We are looking to see if there would be something different that's more appropriate for this line. And we're working with Santa Cruz Metro to conduct an alternatives analysis for what those transit options could be. And we began the study in December 2019, and we expect to complete it by early next year. And at our last RTC board meeting, we withered the list of 20 potential options down to 4, and I'm showing those 4 options now. The alternatives analysis is a performance-based planning approach based on a triple bottom line sustainability framework, and it's looking at the greatest benefits in terms of equity, the environment, and the economy. And I did receive a question that was sort of a question, it was more of a statement, but they asked that I comment on it. And the statement was, by European standards, an up-to-date train from Santa Cruz to San Jose would take about 14 minutes, and it would go straight through a tunnel, and modern trains run at speeds of over 150 miles an hour and have to be built that to that standard to be effective. And I think a train running 150 miles on this line would not be appropriate. I don't think that a tunnel between Watsonville and Santa Cruz is necessary. I think we could look at something like one of these 4 options that could provide service between Santa Cruz and Watsonville in more like 40 minutes, but the longer you take, the lower your ridership is going to get, and that's why we're doing the study. And at the end of the study, we are going to produce a business plan and take a look at whether these alternatives are really viable for the rail line. So the alternatives shown from top to bottom, I'll kind of work in a counterclockwise direction. The first one is bus rapid transit, and that would be basically paving on the line and putting something similar to a Santa Cruz Metro bus on the line. The alternative in the bottom left corner is an autonomous road train, and that would operate like a train without the need for a driver. It would be able to run autonomously, but it would be rubber tired, running on asphalt. And then the other two options are rail options. The bottom right corner is an electric commuter rail car. Those can run faster, but I don't see anything running faster than maybe 50, 60 miles an hour on our rail line, or an electric light rail line. So all of the options are considered green. We wouldn't want to be running anything diesel, was the message that we heard. There's a lot of advanced interest and technology improvements for the electric light rail, where you could have it be battery operated. You wouldn't need an overhead catenary system. They could be extremely quiet. And so those are the four options that we're looking at moving forward and making an ultimate solution or decision as to whether or not one of these four options are something that the RTC would want to pursue. So the next steps, June through September, we'll be doing performance measures on those four short list alternatives. We'll be doing outreach as part of what we're calling Milestone 3 in September to analyze the results and draft locally preferred alternative. In October, we'll be doing a presentation to the RTC on the analysis of results of the locally preferred alternative. And then in November, we'll be again going to the RTC for potential approval. And then in early 2021, we'll be taking the final report and business plan to the RTC for potential approval. So a question came up, will the transit on the corridor require a new tax measure? And my answer to that question is possibly. Most agencies do look to subsidize operations. We're fortunate right now that there are a lot of grant opportunities for transit. So when we put together our business plan, we're gonna have to look at those options. I've also would want to look into opportunities for private partnerships to see if there are opportunities on the rail line to go that direction. But we're still very early in the process, and we're very much still in the planning stages and doing a planning study and haven't taken it to the level yet of final engineering. So the final category in Measure D, and one of the questions I've had is, what we're going to do about, excuse me, the Highway 1. And 25% of Measure D is dedicated to highway projects. We can do auxiliary lanes. We can do bicycle and pedestrian overcrossings, which I mentioned earlier. And we can also do bus and shoulders projects, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Also on our list of projects are congestion and safety programs, such as the Freeway Service Patrol, Safe on 17, and Cruise 511 programs that RTC does to help reduce traffic, improve safety, and clear accidents. So I'm going to take a sip of water here because my throat is drying up. So a lot of people have asked exactly what are auxiliary lanes and what is bus on shoulders. So auxiliary lanes are those lanes that you see that connect an off-ramp of one interchange to an on-ramp of the subsequent interchange. You'll see a couple locations existing on Highway 1 right now. One between Morrissey Boulevard and Soquel has been constructed, and that's a location that actually the traffic moves pretty well in the morning through. In the afternoon, it doesn't work so well because you have bottlenecks coming the other direction. But auxiliary lanes have been found to be cost-effective ways to prevent some of that cut-through that I talked about earlier, where people get off the highway and try to find a way around the traffic. So we're hopeful that this will help improve operations and keep people on the highway. One of the other things that we're moving forward with is Monterey and Santa Cruz County are the only two counties in the state where there is legislation that allow buses to ride on the shoulders to bypass traffic. Santa Cruz has always been a county that has had shown high value in transit. We've had a tax dedicated to Santa Cruz Metro since the 1970s, well before Measure D. And but the problem is those buses are sitting in the same traffic as our vehicles today. So we came up with an innovative idea of trying to address both the cut-through traffic that we see and the operational problems that we have on Highway 1, solve some of those pinch points like the Aptos Strangler, where those two rail bridges go across the highway, and there are no shoulders on Highway 1. And so we've combined these two concepts to do a kind of hybrid bus on shoulder auxiliary lane concept, where the buses would be riding in the auxiliary lanes along with vehicles that are entering and exiting the freeways, and then would continue on in the yellow area underneath the interchanges. So we wouldn't have to widen and replace all those interchanges, and that saves an awful lot of funding, so we can apply that on the other crossings of Highway 1, like the Capitola Avenue, the rail bridges, and Mar Vista overcrossing. And that's our kind of concept of how we can provide a more cost-effective way of moving people through and doing improvements on Highway 1. So I was asked questions with respect to when these projects will be delivered. So right now, this map here shows the existing auxiliary lanes from Morrissey to Soquel Drive. And as part of Contract 1, we will use those auxiliary lanes, but we've also have completed our environmental document and are in final design for the auxiliary lanes between Soquel and 41st Avenue. And that will be ready for construction in 2021, dependent upon funding. So we're looking to apply for grants for Contract 1, and that would be 2.75 miles. Contract 2 is 3 miles long, and there are 2 sets of auxiliary lanes, and they're from Bay Porter Street from Porter Street and Bay Avenue to Park, and from Park to State Park. And they connect on the left-hand side to an existing set of auxiliary lanes. So that would provide an additional 3 miles. And we're expected to complete the environmental phase of that project in early 2021 and go straight into final design, and could be ready for construction a year later, dependent upon funding. And then I show there a future contract, but that future contract is actually reality. We just entered into a contract with a engineering and environmental firm to start environmental, the last 2 sets of auxiliary lanes. And that's from State Park Drive to Rio Del Mar Boulevard, and from Rio Del Mar to Freedom. And that would include the infamous Aptos Strangler. It would include replacing those 2 rail bridges with bridges that could accommodate both transit and a trail. So it would provide access to Aptos Village from the Seacliff neighborhood, and then back down to the Seascape neighborhood and down towards Rio Del Mar, where we could connect to Sumner Avenue until we obtain additional funding to go further with the trail segments. So that's the status of the highway projects. I did get a question or another comment about our traffic, and it was a major portion of the local transportation expenditure is for Highway 1. And most of that is to accommodate the folks who live in Watsonville and beyond, who work in Santa Cruz or over the hill. And the person said, instead of sending the money building more road, one would be doing a much better service building rental housing for those folks in Santa Cruz or near where they work. And so I decided to show you this slide, which kind of shows what really is happening in terms of traffic in Santa Cruz County. And on Highway 1, we get about 100,000 people using it today. There's about 125,000 commuters in Santa Cruz County. And 96,000 of those commuters live and work in Santa Cruz County. So they're using the highway to get to and from locations in Santa Cruz. Only about 21,000 commute out to the Bay Area, about 6,000 towards Monterey and 2,000 elsewhere. And then about 5,500 people actually commute into the area, 5,500 from the Bay Area, 9,000 from Monterey, and 2,500 from elsewhere. So there's 17,000 coming in, 29,000 going out, 96,000 internal. There really is a need for us to do something inside Santa Cruz County to address our transportation needs. And looking at those 3 routes that kind of address the Watsonville to Santa Cruz corridor, addressing it in a multimodal fashion that emphasizes the highway, the bike and pedestrian routes, and possible transit on the route line is the direction that the commission has told me to move in, and that's what we're doing. We are very excited about Senate Bill 1, which was passed not too long after Measure D passed, and there's major grant opportunities available. There's $250 million a year that is provided by the Solutions to Congested Corridor Program, and another $200 million per year that's available by the state and local partnership program. And we're working very hard on a grant application right now to include those first 2 phases of the highway project, which would include the Chanticleer Avenue bike ped overcrossing, the Capitola Avenue bridge replacement feature as well. The Mar Vista bike ped overcrossing would be included, and then those improvements on Soquel Avenue to provide protected bike lanes and transit priority and signal adaptive signals and crosswalk improvements are all included in this grant application. We've gotten a very positive response from California Transportation Commissioners. Our ask is big. We're asking for about $107 million. We're matching it by about 20% of local money, but we think we will compete pretty aggressively for this funding. They seem to be really excited about the bus on shoulder concept. They see it as very innovative. They like the multimodal approach. They like the fact that we completed a study that really looks at things holistically and takes into account multiple modes, addresses issues associated with disadvantaged communities and how to get people beyond just those driving in a single occupancy vehicle to their destination. So that's a major priority for us. So the last question that I got that I don't think I've addressed yet is regarding the Mar Vista bike ped overcrossing, and I thought it best to address here. And the question is, many Seacliffians, and I didn't know you had your own name, but you do, have voiced concern about the safety risks associated with the location of the proposed Mar Vista bike pedestrian crossing, and I have urged the RTC to consider another location. Has the RTC looked into other crossing sites, and what is the status of this project? So the Mar Vista bike ped overcrossing project planning has been going on before I started at RTC. The project team held a number of focus meetings with community groups in July and October of 2017 during the feasibility assessment. And there was some sentiment during those two meetings that moving forward with this overcrossing would be preferable. And based on that feedback, the project team did study the state lands property to see if it was a viable alternative, and that would be further to the north. But unfortunately, access to the endpoints of the overcrossing is blocked by both creeks and private property. So land to the west of private property is owned by the state and similarly unavailable. And one of the goals of the project was to connect a high population density center around Mar Vista to each other, and to provide services to the Soquel Drive neighborhoods, including Mar Vista Elementary School, which is on the other side of the highway from the Seacliff neighborhood. So we are moving forward with this location. It is now part of the highway project because we felt it was the fastest way of getting it environmentally cleared and including it in this grant application. It will connect to some significant improvements for bikes and peds on Soquel Drive. And then eventually it'll be pretty close to the rail line where we will be developing the trail segment through the Seacliff neighborhood as well. So the county is going to be having some public meetings over the summer, and we'll be announcing them and posting them on our website. So if you're more interested in the Mar Vista project, please stay tuned. We'll be providing more information with the help of the county in the near future. So that completes my presentation. I know Emily stated that we wouldn't have time to answer any additional questions that weren't asked in advance, and I did try to answer all of them. But if there's anything else you are interested in asking me right now, Emily, just or Zach, please let me know, and I'll try to do what I can.
Yeah, yeah, I did get one. A question, is an electric minibus system in consideration at all on the rail corridor where then no rail is needed? Because you gave a picture of those 4 items, but is an electric minibus, was that considered and scrapped?
So we did look at an electric minibus on the rail line, and one of the challenges we found with putting a smaller bus system on the rail line is that any system where you're dealing with smaller vehicles, you have a greater ability to provide service on demand, and that's very attractive. And I can see why people would like that sort of a concept where you could call and get a vehicle for 2 or 3 people and go exactly where you want to go when you want to go there. But the challenges of doing that is that sort of a system would have to be a two-way system. You'd have to be able to pass almost anywhere. So you're looking at potentially wider widths. You also have to consider the fact that we have over 20 at-grade crossings on this rail line. And so all of those crossing locations right now are set up for rail, where you have crossing gates that come down only when the rail car goes by. If you're turning this into a system where on demand a vehicle can come by, you're basically creating a highway that is going to cross all of these existing locations, and you're going to need to look at the impacts of what it does to the local street network and whether it makes sense. And it also doesn't really promote transit-oriented development, and that's been a big issue with the state at this time. They're looking for higher density near transportation corridors so that there's less use of people using private vehicles. There's also been a lot of talk about whether or not these these smaller buses could actually intermix with the trail, and you just have this wide pavement area where you could have these mini buses and you could have the bike and ped trail, and everything could just kind of work together. And I really question whether that was very well thought out in terms of safety, because one of the questions I had earlier was should you be going 150 miles an hour? And I'm like, well, no, we're not going to be going 150 miles an hour. We're looking at maybe 40, 50, 60 miles an hour top. But a minibus, you know, it's going to want to go faster than 15, 20, 25 miles an hour. You're, you know, if you're going to make travel times, you're looking at going at speeds comparable to what I was talking about. In any system like that, you're not going to want your pedestrians and bicycles to be intermixing with it. You're going to need to separate those two. So you're going to have the additional width needed of having to try to go two-way, and then you're going to need to have separate areas still for your trail. So we did look at it, but it wasn't one of the 4 alternatives that we decided to move forward with our analysis, and those were the main reasons why.
Okay, great. I have another question. What is considered high capacity in transit?
So that's a word that we used coming out of the UCS, and we use that to try to get across the point that we're trying to move as many people as we possibly can. We're trying to create a system that's going to be effective and have the ability to attract ridership and be able to grow and provide people with an option. I've actually stopped using it so much lately because people seem to get confused by it. It's really was meant to provide a description that we're not looking at a sort of transit that isn't going to be able to serve a significant portion of our community.
Okay, so assorted. Great. Anyone else in the chat? Got a question, or you could unmute yourself.
Hi, Kate Minot. I wanted to know if you'd had the chance to ride in the Daisy on the rail line. And if you had, if you enjoyed the experience, and if we could do something adorable and cute like that rather than these monorails that we keep seeing the photos of, the examples of.
So I did get to ride on the Daisy, and I absolutely loved it. Right about when I started, they arranged for me to ride, and I rode it from West Side all the way down to Buena Vista, and that's about as far as we could get. So it was a good opportunity to see a good portion of the rail line. The Daisy, I think we went about 5 to 10 miles an hour. I think maybe it can top out at 15 miles an hour. It's cute. It can't hold that many people. It can hold maybe 4 or 5 passengers. They were no longer permitted to take passengers on it because they don't have ADA access. So he was at one point looking at marketing that, but because he can't provide uniform access to people with disabilities, he's not able to operate that for the general public. It is, you know, we get a demonstration from a group that was interested in providing a trolley on the line. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that they showed us, the car was like an open air sort of car. It looked like a cable car almost. It was cute, and that is an option. And I have had people come to me about running that sort of a system. It would hold more than maybe the 6 or 7 people that the Daisy could hold, and it could be made ADA accessible. So there are options that would be different than those 4 options that I've shown for recreational travel. And I have been told that those cars can be retrofit with battery operated systems that can run quite a bit faster after 50 miles an hour. So you can put any sort of body on this that you want. And you could put a open air kind of cable car looking body on it, or you could put something more sleek that would be protected from the elements that would be more appropriate for a commuter. So there are options out there, and it's really kind of interesting to see what those are and where we may go with this. So yes, I did get an opportunity to ride the Daisy, and I loved it.
And I don't even know what the daisy is, but anyway.
I wish I had a picture of it. It's a cute little trolley. They had it out around Christmas time on Seabright Boulevard here near Hot Chocolate. If
It's
I
a
can find a
prototype.
picture, I'll fire one off to you.
It's a prototype of like a little caboose, and it really is much too small. But it's an idea of, I think, what a lot of us would like to see along a rail corridor, which is an imaginative little trolley, and not the monorail that we keep seeing presented that goes too fast.
Well, okay, so I know there's 2 more questions. So I have one. What is the dollar per year subsidy per rider annually for uses of the rail line route options? I mean, that's kind of right off the top of your head.
So I don't know that figure off the top of my head. We've done 2 studies, and there was a feasibility study where they talk about that, and then the UCS talked about that. Our current study is going to talk about that too, but most transit lines do require a subsidy. It goes back to the question earlier of, are you going to need to tax us to be able to put in a system here? And most transit operations are subsidized, and often it is a tax, similar to a sales tax. It could be a parcel tax. But I've been approached by people that are interested in more of a public-private partnership model. So there could be opportunities to do it in a way that would not require as much of a subsidy. So I'm really interested in this next phase of the study to look to see, in putting together a business plan, if we could look at options where that subsidy would come down or possibly even go away. Because I understand there are concerns about whether or not we're going to have to tax people more for transportation. And right now, transportation taxes are not doing that well. Some big ones lost in the last election, and I think people are having a little bit of fatigue. And COVID-19 has been hard on our economy, and I think it would be a difficult sell right now. So I do think we really need to address the cost issue coming out of this study moving forward.
Great. Okay, Rebecca.
I noticed in the graphic that mentioned where people came from and went, that one right there. That's the traffic pattern one. And I noticed that, let's see, we have people coming in. I see 9,000 from Monterey and 2,500 from elsewhere. And I know that the Monterey County Transportation Commission, equivalent of ours, has their own projects going. So what I'd like to know is, how does the Regional Transportation Commission sort of coordinate or work with that agency? Because clearly someone who lives in Monterey County, and works at UCSC or something, they're doing a long drive there. So I didn't know how you work with them and how you factor that information in some of these transportation plans that you're considering.
So Santa Cruz County is part of the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, which consists of San Benito, Santa Cruz, and Monterey counties. So we work very closely with them to develop our regional transportation plan. And then AMBAG takes our 3 regional transportation plans and they put them together to create a metropolitan transportation plan. So all of our data gets looked at cohesively. So we do work very closely with those in Monterey County to address the traffic. As part of our alternatives analysis on the rail line, we did receive some funding from Caltrans to do network integration, because the rail line connects to Monterey at Pajaro, and as Monterey is interested in developing a station there, they're also interested in restoring regular service between San Jose and Salinas on their rail line. So if we were ever to have transit and have the ability to get people over to the Pajaro station, there may be options in the future to connect up to service leading up to San Jose. And then San Jose, of course, is that station is going to be the hub of the future of rail in California. It will have not only Caltrain coming into it in the service running down to Gilroy and Salinas, but also high-speed rail is coming in there. BART is going to be coming into San Jose Diridon Station in the near future. It really is going to be the most multimodal station in California, even more so than LA Union Station.
Okay, thanks.
How many commuters are projected to be on the rail line? Is a question.
Our current studies, our ridership was not that high. It was more in the neighborhood of about 5,000. So it'd be interesting to see if the current study and using some of these different ideas and technologies came up with higher figures. But any system that starts out early on, it takes a while to build it and grow. I remember, hearing lots of stories about when BART first started out, and people said it was a train to nowhere and it's never going to be used. And now communities that rejected it are
Wanting it, yeah.
wishing that it would go there. And the effort that it was put in to try to get it to San Jose has been enormous. It's pretty unusual to have dedicated right-of-way where you can do this. So we're one step ahead in that we actually own the right-of-way. And I think that's why the commission was so, even though there's a high price tag on it and the ridership numbers aren't coming out that great, I mean, they look at this sort of an asset and they know kind of what's happened over the years in transportation, where they ripped out the rail lines and then they wish that they didn't. And so, with respect to this corridor, it's been a challenge for our commission because the ridership numbers aren't great, the costs are high, but they see a transportation problem and an opportunity here too. And I think that's been the big dichotomy of, really, does it make sense to move forward with some sort of transit on the rail line? And I'm sure that's what the people that are asking these questions are getting at. And, it's been a difficult one for the commission, and right now that's why we're still in the planning stage and continuing to do studies and haven't moved forward with anything yet. But hopefully, moving out of this study, we're going to be able to get more data and look at some of these emerging technologies to see if we can come up with a better model. So we'll see where that goes.
Oh gosh. Well, do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, I have plenty of time.
Okay, there was one, it said BART goes in two directions. What do surveys show bike commuters would be?
Bike commuters?
Yeah.
Well, bike commuters is definitely going to be going two ways, but I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah. Adele, want to take yourself off mute? Go ahead, Adele. Ask.
Keep trying.
Okay, there you are. I hear you.
Okay. Good evening. Good discussion. So I know a number of surveys were done in the county and the community. Did one pinpoint down at all what the number of people who wanted to commute by bicycle that would use this special corridor? Do we have any figures on that?
I don't have any numbers in front of me, but there's been studies, like you said, and there's a lot of opportunity to use this for bike peds. There's never been a debate about using the corridor for bikes and peds. We're developing the bike ped path right now. The debate has sometimes gone into whether we should rip up the rail line and build only a trail. But right now the commission has asked that we continue to study transit and build the trail adjacent to the transit corridor. We are developing the trail, and I expect there to be pretty high usage of the trail for both bikes and peds on the corridor. And I expect that would be the case whether you ripped up the rail lines or not.
So will there be a bike trail in Aptos Village?
So yes, so earlier on I showed
Show the picture.
showed the slide. You may have joined a little bit late, but the trail would run along the rail line all the way through the Seacliff neighborhood. It would go over Highway 1 into Aptos Village and then continue down to Rio Del Mar. Eventually, it would go all the way to Watsonville, but right now we don't have funding for that identified yet. So we're working on the section between where Rio Del Mar goes over the rail track in the Seascape neighborhood, all the way up to Davenport. That whole section is under development right now.
So that's section 11 and 12, basically, or
so through Seacliff and Seascape, it's 11 and 12. Yes.
Great.
In Aptos Village.
Okay. Well, so I'm sure that you are available by email, but if people have additional, are they free to email you, or are you overwhelmed with?
Well, I do ask that you use our general email account because a lot of questions can be answered by our communications director. So the email address info@sccrtc.org is the best place to send email correspondence.
Great.
But I often get involved in answering the questions that we do get. But that way we can keep track of things and I don't lose things. And
no, that's wonderful. That's something that we'll put in our wrap up of this, is if they do have further questions to ask that, because I don't want to overwhelm your personal email with things. But oh no, that was wonderful. Guy, I really appreciate learning like this, and you know, it's flying the plane with less than the full service. I know you could have talked more and more about everything, but I certainly do appreciate this. We'll keep in touch. And again, thank you so much. Zach had to go to another meeting, but I wanted to thank him and for you know, coming on, and for his town halls. So we're sending out town hall meetings to, you know, emails to everyone too. But again, thank you so much, Guy. Appreciate it. And thank you everyone for attending. And we will be posting this and sending a link in either an email or a newsletter. So
Thank you.
thank you,
Thank
guys.
you,
you're
guys.
very welcome.
Excellent.
I really appreciate the interaction and the very good questions. You guys are obviously on top of things. So
We've lived here a long time.
yeah, and one of my favorite communities to go bike to. So, and I wish there was an easier route there, because the route I take right now requires me to ride on several streets that I would love to get off of. So
yeah,
but I'm still coming down there all the time. So
We appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
okay,
thank you,
care.
everyone. Take
Bye.
care.
Thanks, everybody.
Rebecca.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye now.